Oh, sorry. I guess I'm daydreaming here. Well, hi. This is our chapter overview from the textbook. So I'm going to start with chapter 1. This is that chapter talks about, who is a leader, what skills do they need, is it important, how do we define it, that kind of thing. It also talks a lot about, the self-assessment. You can take a lot of self-assessments throughout the course of this, using this textbook. So the bottom line about leadership and like, why should we study it? What's in it for you? That kind of thing. On a personal level and on a corporate level, we already know the bottom line tells us that it will increase your success rate. Now, I could get into the whole thing about the business case for understanding and teaching and learning leadership skills, but you should already know that by now, right? So really, leadership is everybody's business. It really is. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to grow up and be a manager or a CEO or any of those things, but it will still apply, within your work groups. I mean, there's no such thing as not working in a team environment anymore. And I know, like, for students, especially, you just really despise working in teams and in groups. Well, it's not going to get a lot better when you go to the workplace. Sad to say, because we don't necessarily teach people how to work in a team, right? We don't teach them about group dynamics. With your education, you will understand these things better than a lot of the people you're working with. Those are leadership skills, right? So even just look at it at that level of getting through a team project or a committee work that you got assigned to through your job, and you'll find out very quickly what's in it for me, making life easier, right? And in the book, there's the, is leadership really important? This is I think this is the guy, he created Dilbert, the cartoon Dilbert. And so if you take a look at that, it's, Scott Adams, he's the creator of Dilbert, and he really makes fun of managers and all of that. I mean, right all the way, especially like on the CEO level. So if we read through this a little bit, he just really basically feels that it's just a crock, right? And he thinks that it's part of their DNA, to get hung up on this whole idea of leadership and things like that. But then they don't necessarily exhibit those characteristics in real life, like say as I do, but not as I don't, or however that saying goes, right? And then they ask us at the end of that little thing, it's in that, I think it's 1.1, which you make the ethical choice or whatever it's called. I've kind of got two textbooks sitting here because I just got a different edition. So if you have two different editions, I'm not going to be using page numbers because sometimes students end up with the last edition, and it's not that big a deal, but the page numbers won't line up, right? The information in textbooks, sadly, is usually pretty close to the same. So if I do use a textbook page number and you can't find the page number, it's in there. Just you'll look for the headings, right? Especially since we do textbook buybacks and rentals and things. So sometimes you're actually sent the wrong one, even though you asked for a different one. But anyway, besides that, it's that you make the ethical choice or whatever it is. And Scott Adams asked this question, do you agree with him that leadership's a crock, right? Or do you really need to have someone in the leadership role? Well, you probably know where I stand on this, right? I've just been around the block way too many times to know that if someone doesn't often step up and take a leadership role, chaos isn't very fun in the workplace. It's not fun in your life either, because we generally just need some direction, and it doesn't have to be on some mega level. In the corporate world, we definitely need solid. I mean, if you want to be a level 5 leader and run a very successive corporation or whatever it is you want to do, it takes work. I mean, this is the difference between driving like a Yugo and a Cadillac. Right? Driving the Cadillac, that's your level 5. The Yugo, level 1. We all start out with level 1, right? Pretty much anything that we do, we have to work our way up. So defining leadership, we can argue about that. You can read what the book has to say about that. But what I think is more indicative to what leadership is all about is when they're using the key elements that the textbook talks about. So if you look at exhibit 1.1, and the exhibits and things should be pretty much the same if you're using a different edition of the book. Leadership definition using those key elements. So the key elements are influencing organizational objectives, people, change, and the leader followers. So we're going to take a look real quickly here. Like I said, I don't touch on everything in the chapters, but I do touch on the things I think that it's important for you to help you understand the concepts of leadership that we need to Well, that will help you not only with your coursework and the projects, but going forward in your work life. So the leader-follower relationship, and believe me too, the self-assessments that are in these chapters, you guys are going to be doing a lot, almost all of them in the chapters that we read, and you're going to be using those for the projects, for both the projects. So make sure that you just go ahead and fill this stuff in as you go. Like I say, this textbook I love this book because it's like a big workbook, okay? But if you look at the leader-follower relationship, that's this idea of teams. Now, don't think of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay. This is my team, right? This is my team, because there's all kinds of different types of teams. We have daily work teams and project teams, things like that. But for that to work, you're not always trying to be the leader. You have to have a really good relationship for both. So you also need to be a good follower. And we'll get into this in another chapter, so that you can understand that better on a little bit deeper level. But it's basically a two-way street. So your boss should be supporting you in the work that you do, but you should also be supporting your boss in the work that they do. Now, this is kind of a misnomer. A lot of people think it's only a one-way street. Well, everybody should be supporting me, right? Well, that's my boss's job. Well, that's actually not true. And you will be more successful the more that you can walk that two-way street with your bosses, right? And on multiple levels with your bosses, right? We already know from previous classes that there's main functions that managers perform. If I were to ask you, see, this is why I don't like tests, because they'd have to think through it. What are the 4 functions? Planning, organizing, leading, controlling. I think there's often a 5th one thrown in there. And this particular book talks about those 4. So good leaders, this also helps us learn how to manage those 4 or 5 major functions that we need to perform, right? And one other thing you're going to learn in this book is, and I do the same thing, we use the terms interchangeably, right? Manager, leader. For me, any role where you have to take charge, to me, you're in a leadership role. And I don't care what the title is. I don't care if you're the supervisor, teacher, or manager, VP, or whatever those are, you're in a leadership role. Now, some of the functions that we do within those roles will be very different, won't they? So if you're the lead on a front line in a manufacturing facility, that's a leadership role, right? Don't forget that. And you need these skills too. Now, what you do on the front line with your employees is going to be different than what, let's say, the manager of that entire department, right? Now, influencing. And again, in the book, when you read the book, they always give us a nice definition of everything. In this, they say influencing is the process of a leader communicating those ideas, gaining acceptance of them, motivating their supporters, right? Implementing ideas through change. So that's how we influence people to get the things done that we need to get done, right? So that's that influencing part. So we have leaders and followers. Well, how are we going to influence one another to, number one, get what we want, which should be aligned with your corporate goals, right? But do it in a way that everybody's got buy-in, and then that's not so painful. That gets commitment, and it gets people excited and enthusiastic, right? If you can do that, you can get people to really walk through fire for you, right? Then we talk about organizational objectives. That's pretty straightforward. You should already know what that is. The leader's role is to accomplish our organizational objectives, set the right objectives, set the right goals, and then accomplish them, right? And then change. Change is a big deal. I would love it if we just had one whole course on managing change, because we don't do it really well. Change management is an art and a science, right? But again, when we look here, the book is talking about effective leaders realize the need for continual change to improve performance, right? If this course is a second-year course in our program, so generally you should have had a lot of classes before you take this course, and you should already know that by now, right? How important it is to manage change. How many times have you heard in your own job or all the different jobs you've heard yourself say, oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, we tried that 10 years ago. That ain't gonna fly. Yeah, whatever, just another new flavor of the month, right? Successful leaders don't do that, all right? And then the last part of this is the people part. And again, this is about people. I shouldn't have to really elaborate too much, but one thing I did like about this little section here is they talked about the direct relationship between the company's financial success and its commitment to leadership practices that treat people as assets, right? Not like you own them, right? But you have to go into this with the mindset that we don't do anything without our people, right? So why would I treat my people like crap, right? Because I can tell you 1,000 times over, out of all, oh gosh, I don't know, you students have asked me, I think I could remember 17 jobs I've had in my lifetime. This is the longest job I've ever had. I didn't leave the jobs, I left the bosses. We leave people, we don't leave the jobs, right? Then leadership skills, you know, you guys are, I'm not going to talk too long here because you guys are working on this as part of our introduction to the chapter. Are leaders born or made? So I'm going to leave that alone. Also, can leaders be taught and skills developed? So again, because you guys are doing an exercise that involves that, I'm not going to talk too much about that. The managerial leadership skills, you need technical skills, interpersonal skills, decision-making skills. You need all of these things have to be based on a management level, all right? But like, for example, we start out with a lot of generally we start out with a lot of really good technical skills. We know how to do the job. Then as our leadership skills improve, we start gaining and we get through education and work experience, our interpersonal skills get better. Because I'm telling you, the farther up you move up on the management ladder, the more important the interpersonal skills come in. And then at the very top, when you're at the top of your pyramid of wherever you work, I don't want to use terms because every company and every industry has their own. Let's just say CEO, right? Now you have to be really good with those decision-making skills. We don't necessarily care about the technical skills anymore because no one's going to ask the CEO to go out of the shop floor and do anything because gosh forbid they'll wreck it. I guarantee it. It's not their job anymore, right? They don't remember how to do it anymore. So if you look at Exhibit 1.2, management skills, it shows you that pyramid. So that's what I'm talking about. The technical skills are the basis for everything. Then as you move up the corporate ladder, how you improve and get promotions, you see people that have improved their interpersonal skills and their decision-making skills. That's how you get promoted. As far as like the managerial leadership roles go, you can look again, the text is talking about the 3 different categories, and there's like 10 different roles. So in the category 1 are those interpersonal roles, and then there's like 10. I think there's 10. Yeah, it's 10 of those underneath that. You play the figurehead role, like this is the person you see on TV. You have that leadership role, but you also have the role of being a liaison between entities, right? The second category, well, there's like total of 10 roles that fall under these 3 categories. I think I said that wrong to start with. So that first category, interpersonal, those 3 things fall under there. Then the informational roles, the second category, then the monitoring role is that 4th one. The disseminator role is the 5th one, and the spokesperson is the 6th one. 6th type of role that you play. So, and I'm not going to read all of these to you. They're very straightforward, and they're just short little paragraphs. But you can already should start to see that, holy cannoli, I mean, just in that interpersonal side of things, I'm playing a lot of different roles. And then that decision, that 3rd category falls under the decisional roles, right? So now is when you play the entrepreneur, which means you're pretty good at taking risks, calculated risks. Disturbance handler role, the resource allocator role, and then the negotiator role. And if you can look and be successful in these roles and understand how they're used, again, you're going to keep moving up towards a level 5 leadership. So when you look at, I think I have you guys already doing the concept application number 2. And when I have you fill these out, you're going to find the answers to them like in the next week's learning plan, because they're not a test. It's not a test. I want you to think it through. Like, where do you think how do these, figure it out on your own, and then go look to see if you got them right or not. And if you didn't, then you can learn why, right? Then the next part of this is, I'm looking at the clock, almost 14 minutes. I like to keep these lectures down at 15 minutes or less, so we'll see. Levels of analysis of leadership theory. Oh my gosh, don't get hung up on the verbiage here. This is an introduction to leadership, but this textbook's a little bit higher level in that. This is a science-based book. This isn't, one based on just willy-nilly theories, or not willy-nilly theories, but just taking surveys and such. So what I really want you to just understand is that how the book is actually set up. Like the first 5 chapters or so are talking about the individual level of analysis, which they call the dyadic process. Don't let words like that. I don't even like words like that, because I always have to remember, like, hey, which one is the dyadic? Can't we just say the individual level of analysis? Then the group level of analysis, that's group dynamics, right? That's just plain and simple group dynamics. And then I think it's like chapters 6 through 8 kind of touch on those things. And then the organizational level of analysis is just how organizational processes work, right? It's how we look at it on an organizational level. So the first level of analysis is on an individual basis. The second is on the team or the group basis. And the last is the big picture organizational, right? How these intermingle, they just basically support one another. And exhibit 1.4 shows you that pyramid. They overlay and they just fill in one another, without getting too deep into theory, right? Now, they do tell us a little bit about some of the theory paradigms. For example, leadership theory paradigms, right? The trait theory paradigm. Again, don't let this kind of stuff throw you. What I like to do is just give you what the plain English is. When you look at the trait theory paradigm, it just represents the individual traits of the leader. That's all it is. So trait theory means, let's look at the traits of the leader. The behavioral leadership theory paradigm is just based on that leader's behavior. So everybody has certain traits, right? But then everybody also has certain behaviors that they exhibit as they do their work. And then the contingency leadership theory, this is just basically saying you use the leadership style that best suits you, right? And you'll notice as you read these that these were developed through different periods of research. So the emphasis on the trait came in 1900s to 1940s. The behavioral leadership was, through the research done in the 50s. And then I think the contingency leadership, then moved on to the 1960s. They started to understand that, that's kind of interesting. People are adjusting their leadership style based on the need of the situation, the individual, and things like that. And then we get into the 70s plus, and that's that integrative leadership theory paradigm. Don't you love all this, Larry? Paradigms. This combines all three, right? And that's why leaders are so successful. So just as a little history, we started out thinking way back in the early 1900s, it was all about the traits, right? Then we decided, well, no, I think it's more about behaviors. Then it's like, well, no, I think it's kind of, contingent on which the leader prefers. And then as we started, our research methods got better, longitudinally technology, we came to the conclusion, like in the 70s plus, which is where we're at now, basically, is that combining all of these together are why some leaders are more successful than others. Your ability to combine all of those together. Then we move on to the management. It says from the management to the leadership theory paradigm. Oh my gosh. Say that 9 times. So basically all they're saying is you're shifting from being the old school, tell them what to do, autocratic management style to our newer version, which is called participative management style, which again means that we're much more aware of the leader-follower relationship and that people need to be treated like human beings, right? They're not machines, right? Let's see. And then we don't need to get into the objectives of the book. And that wraps up chapter 1. Sorry, I just got a little bit longer. It's about 19 minutes. This book, because there's a lot of theory and there's a lot of verbiage that we need to kind of talk about. These might be more like 20-minute overviews, but I'll try to make sure I keep it under that for you. Now, remember, as you read through this stuff, if something just doesn't make sense and you're just like, gosh, I just can't get this, email me so that we can go through some things one-on-one. We have Blackboard Collaborate where we can go on. It's like Skype. And we have access to that right through Blackboards. You don't need to be signed up to anything. We can have a phone call, email. So don't fret. Read through the material and don't overthink it, right? Other than that, I guess the next time I see you, I'll probably be in chapter 2 or whichever our next chapter is, which I think is chapter 2. All right, you guys have a good day. Bye.